April meeting of the Wyoming Board of Education. I call this meeting to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Thomas.
Here.
Mrs. G.
Here.
Mrs. Zoller.
Here.
Mrs. Broderick.
Here.
Mr. Feldmeyer.
Here.
Thank you. Will you all please join me with the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda as written? Okay. May I have a roll call?
Mrs. G.
Yes.
Mrs. Zoller.
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick.
Yes.
Mr. Feldmeyer.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Recognition of the public, we have no names on our list, so we will move on from there. We have a number of presentations tonight that show just how wonderful this community is and how willing you all are to be involved in so many aspects of the wonderful things that happen in Wyoming. So I'm going to start, first of all, with Toya Wall, who is our representative on the Great Oaks Board of Education. She represents Wyoming and is there for us. We thank you. She sent us just so everyone understands, she sent us a number of documents to look at regarding the fiscal situation at the Great Oaks. And then we also asked her to make a presentation not necessarily a presentation, but we asked her to share with us some of the things the connections between Wyoming and Great Oaks, and I'll just turn it over to you.
Thank you. So Toya Wall, for those of you I haven't met. So my approach today was a little bit different than the past, where I've sort of come in and made a presentation. As I said to Jeannie, I wasn't going to make a presentation. But what I hope to do is I sent you a bunch of information that was really focused on finances, enrollment data, and I was hoping that it would be a data report. It ended up being the student report card. The data report that is still owed to me is more of a deep dive that'll give you a better sense of how students are faring, a little more information than what the state does. And so hopefully the next time I do the report, send you the materials, I will focus on that data report and then the strategic plan so that Harry does later in the year.
Right.
The only other thing I would, before I open up for questions, I think you all might know that Great Oaks opened up their enrollment last year. And so they didn't know if that meant a lot of CPS students would be enrolling, and they weren't really certain how that was going to, fare. But it ended up that we did have a number of Cincinnati Public School students enroll, but not to the extent that they anticipated. So maybe next year, but that will sort of change the dynamics a little bit now that Cincinnati Public students are enrolling and they're doing presentations in the district. Any questions I can answer on the documents that I sent?
It looked very healthy to me. Did I misread anything?
No, I think so. I think in the future, if there's anything significant that feels like this board needs to know financially, the district did just undergo an audit, and so that's what you have with you, and they passed with flying colors. There was just a few things in the management note. Most of it was just based on board participating in an email inquiry, and they didn't get 100% participation. So it was that type of thing. But other than that, I think if there's anything that stands out in terms of, finances and how it would affect this district or any of the districts that support Great Oaks, that's what I would report on. But other than that, I thought just providing that documentation made sense.
Can I ask you a question about the enrollment report?
Yeah.
I don't see Cincinnati Public listed on it.
So that'll be captured in the next enrollment report.
Okay.
So,
I was just trying to see how their number fared against all the other districts listed, and they weren't on there.
yeah, they wouldn't be on there.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so the next enrollment report will include the CPS students, yeah. And as you can see on that report, Wyoming's, enrollment, it's 7 or 8 students pretty much every year that stays pretty consistent.
However, we do have some crossover in that we have tell me how the funding works with our business, our DECA program.
Yeah, so they send, a staff member, so the staff member, Mr. Shepherd, I think his name right? Shepherd, sorry. He teaches a program, a full course load at Wyoming High School, and, Wyoming City Schools doesn't pay for his salary.
Right, so, Great Oaks has satellite teachers all over, all of the campus districts that they serve. They have, Wyoming has one, but other districts, Mount Healthy, for example, has several satellite teachers, and there's a dean of instruction and multiple different programs. I think some of our peer schools, I think Wyoming has fewer programs than most of our peer schools. They have at least 1 or 2 programs. I think we have 1. But yeah, so that's how it works. The Great Oaks has a number of satellite teachers that they send out to all of the districts. So their kids are coming to all of the 4 campuses, and then Great Oaks is going to the schools and are on the site.
Yeah, so that does extend the impact outside of those that travel
Right,
too.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it's a good addition that
Right,
we
right,
have.
absolutely.
Certainly, it's a popular.
Yeah,
Highly
That's
competitive. Mhm.
I can't remember how we figure out how many, classes they teach here. You know what I mean? Like, if you're saying they do 1 here versus, I don't know, is it just student based, is it based on?
I mean,
can't
one in
remember.
terms of program.
Right.
one for
It's a different
program,
program.
classes,
Yeah.
So they're different, so for example, maybe there's DECA, but then there are other, there's a rural program, there's computer, it's, science, there's robotics, there are all of these different programs that schools opt into. Which is, I mean, yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah.
It is
We
good
can
stuff.
continue to understand and learn more about, I mean, just a reminder, Great Oaks gets 2 mills worth of tax revenue from every public school district on this list, which is,
Yeah, so regardless of how many students, they're gonna receive the same amount of money. So yeah, it makes sense to.
2 mills is $800,000 of tax revenue, so our residents are paying 2 mills on your taxes,
For 8 children.
$800,000. So it might be worth seeing if there's another program that we can have. Come and teach.
I have to get full benefit.
Yeah, because that's in law. It's not like we can negotiate a.
No, we're
change in the amount of
required,
money.
we're required to have a program, and so our choice is to decide which one we wanna join. So we
And
could
how-
join the
I think
Oaks, or we
that-
could join Butler Tech, but we
Yeah.
decided with all the other Hamilton County schools to join the Oaks. And they have remarkable programming.
Right.
Yeah,
Remarkable facilities.
And I think the way to do that would be so each of the deans, one of the deans, depending on the program, would be who we would contact.
So, growing our program. I'm gonna write that down.
But I think of it right, I mean, if we were to think about different ones, I don't know if there's a limit on how many you either can get or we have space for, or what have you, but we're paying a certain fee of the different options, robotics or some other thing that they do. Would that be as simple as expanding, in some cases, the set of things that we are doing at the high school for free or for a fee that we've already paid? Is that the way you ought to think about?
I
Our
think so,
choice to
yeah,
get more
I don't think it would not be at a cost to, an additional cost to Wyoming.
Or at least for staffing.
For
And I'm
if
not
for
sure
staff,
about,
yeah,
right,
right,
for
right.
facilities set up and, right.
That's right.
There's a space and availability,
Yeah,
kind of
sure.
questions, you think
Right.
about 2 versus
Yeah, I
12.
mean, and someone on Wyoming side coordinating and
Right.
has to be, yeah.
Right.
Right, yeah. Well, thanks for sending all of that early too, because there's so much.
There was a lot, thank you.
That's
great. No, but it was great
Good.
because you
Okay, okay.
said it, no, plenty of time for us
Okay.
to take a look at it. I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Joy.
And thank you for your contribution as our representative. I appreciate that.
Thank you. All right, have a good evening.
Thanks.
Thank
Joy.
you.
Thanks, Joy.
All right. Next, the CAC, our second group in the CAC has a presentation on social media and its impact on students and family. And, we're gonna let them get
Yeah, well, they get situated. I'll
situated.
just-
I'm gonna
just,
move.
She said second group, but you're the first group in our heart tonight.
Well, I meant in terms of, we had a CAC group
Yeah,
last month,
four.
now this is the other.
And they did, share their great work with the CAC, in our most recent meeting, and just fascinating. Again, we are, just amazed by the research that has been done by the CAC teams, and this is certainly no exception to that, so we appreciate you all being here tonight. Okay.
All right, my name's Dave Manager, and my team here is the social media and its impact on students and families team. For this year, we're made up of Julie Kritzner, Allison Dupuy, Chad Harness, Ian Klingler, Mariana Nickel, and Kathy Ramsetter. One of those folks I wanted to point out, I have to click those things. One of our team members unfortunately passed away this year, but we wanted to acknowledge her contributions and point out that she was a great team member to have, eager to dig into this topic, and so we didn't want that to be overlooked. We only knew her a little bit, but we already miss her. So, the study, what did we do? We were tasked to examine the impact of social media on students and families. We were assigned 2 pieces of media to study in particular. That is the book, The Anxious Generation, and the mini-series / documentary, The Social Dilemma, that was put out by Netflix a few years ago. The other specific tasks that we had were to explore how social media and device use impacts families, and provide some recommendations, as most CAC groups usually would do. As I mentioned, we did study the film, took a lot of notes, read the book, took a lot of notes. We also did a survey of parents in the district, and got 283 responses, which we were happy with. And we also surveyed around to different districts and asked them, what are your policies and how did they go, to the extent that other districts were able to say. So first up, I'll give you a quick rundown of the social dilemma. The basic gist of it is that there are a lot of tech companies today that have built apps and websites and businesses around affecting people's behavior, and in particular in ways that the user may not be aware of or may not want. The thing about the way these businesses work is that the more engagement they can drive, the more money they'll make. And so to a certain extent, they will in fact study behavior modification and psychology and all these things to keep you on the app as much as possible. There we go. We have a couple quotes here, but it's sort of been well studied, in particular that overuse of these apps contributes to negative mental health outcomes, and including disinformation, extremism, negative mental health outcomes, addiction, depression, and anxiety. And studies also show that these are more pronounced in younger users, which is relevant to our interests. That's a quick rundown of the social dilemma. Unfortunately, the movie does not end with a optimistic ending. Because of these business models, this will probably continue without some form of regulation. So it's something to be aware of. The next topic we're going to go into is the anxious generation, and I'm going to introduce it with this slide that will give you some things to think about as we go through all the details. Jonathan Haidt wrote this book, and it's extremely popular this year. he does form a very compelling story of how he believes society has changed in the last decade. There are many correlations that he has discovered and highlights in his book. The science isn't quite so clear on which of these things are causing the others. It's really kind of the answer is still out. And there are some researchers who are concerned that deciding that we figured it out and we're done is more dangerous than continuing to study this. So in any case, we will now talk about the book itself, and Kathy's going to give you that. Well, if you want to see the notes, it's on Chad's. That's for that.
Okay, got it. So I'm going to start a little bit with, just in general, what we know about smartphones and mental health. This is the data from, the book. He has this slide about the increase in major depression, and particularly since the introduction of the smartphone, which is different than the introduction of a cell phone, because of the way that it was behind the scenes, what the social dilemma mentions with the apps and the way they're intended to create addiction and continued use. And it is equally affecting our boys and girls, but in different ways, which we'll get into when we talk just a little bit. But basically, girls are affected more from the social perspective, with feeling lonely and ostracized, whereas boys are getting these two things with gaming and pornography, neither of which are very helpful. I mean, there are parts of gaming which can be quite helpful, but when you're spending all your time there, not spending time in real life. And then I've been recently writing a lot about the neuroscience of learning. I interviewed one of my pediatrician friends, and as he talks about what we know more today than we did 10 years ago about how learning occurs, and when a new idea is introduced into our brain, if we flood it with interference, this is not talking about the addiction of social media, but we flood it with the interference of social media and cell phone and constant distraction, we're interfering with our brain's ability to lay down memory so that later in sleep it can be consolidated, so that later on test day, we can actually remember the information and apply it. And if we don't do that initial step of having some rest and letting the brain do what it needs to do to initially consolidate, we're not going to be able to build on that. And it just is not going to get consistent memory. It's just running interference, and which is which some of the data on smartphone usage is showing that it is running interference for learning, specifically for learning in memory consolidation. According to Height, so the next several slides are going to be what Height is sharing with us. And one of the things that was sort of contra Height was that he's not the psychologist. He's not the one running the studies. But what he is, he's a great storyteller, and he has done the literature review, saving all of us the trouble to do it, which I'm very happy when somebody does that, because I don't like to do all that either, but I've had to do it myself, so I'm going to catch me up here. And so he contrasts, and there are some. This book came out in March of 24, and it has really hit the ground running. I mean, he really has got a lot of traction, got a lot of people interested. And prior to it coming out here in the States, countries in Europe, prior to this book coming out, had already done nationwide cell phone bans in their countries. So this is not a new conversation in Europe. This is a new conversation to our country. In fact, Florida was one of the first states, was the first state in the United States to do a statewide ban in schools of cell phones in 2023. Just FYI there for you. I'm not sure how it's playing out or how that goes, but it was banned in 2023. It may have gotten on the chopping block later, but and I'm not sure what it looks like, but they did ban it in the States. So the point is for Height is if he's looking at real world versus virtual world experiences, you might have heard it in real life versus the social world, but the hazards of one over the other. And to Dave's point to begin with, perhaps it's not an either or, perhaps it's a way of learning how to manage and be in both places in the time that is appropriate. But he also gets down to when we had this increase of social media and phone usage, we had this decrease of in-person play time, exploration, outside time. And as a result, we can see correlated simultaneous to the increase in smartphones, these 4 foundational harms also spiking in our country and our young people. Social deprivation, which is basically, this is so fascinating to me. When cell phones were first introduced, I remember somebody saying, but this is a way for all of our young people that don't feel comfortable to have a voice. They can do polling in the classroom or teaching at UC, and that was a cool thing. Now the kids that don't want to raise their hands can raise their hands. But did we take away the connection with other humans? COVID would probably show us a little bit, it did. But this is really telling this correlation of the number and percentage of students, boys and girls, who often feel lonely with the introduction of smartphones in 2009 and 10. In terms of sleep deprivation, we can all know that when you don't get a good sleep, you can't sleep, you can't think quite well. And also that affects back to how it affects your learning. If you don't sleep well, you don't consolidate your memories for long-term storage, you can't retain them for use and to be scaffolded later. Attention fragmentation is a term that Haidt uses. He actually kind of borrows it from an earlier book by, what was that guy's name? Hold on. Nicholas Carr in The Shallows. And this is how he described that we do make it an intentional decision to be paying attention on task. But when you've got all these things dinging you and buzzing you, and even when you put your phone on silent, it might still buzz you. And the idea that it might happen, all of your thoughts become dazed and kind of fragmented. And this is what a teenager brain looks like. And I just did a presentation to a bunch of people, and I'm like, really, if you look at it, it's like prefrontal cortex is like way squished more than that, where all of our rational thinking is occurring because it's not formed. And the amygdala and the limbic system, which are in the middle where the hippopotamus is there, that's like on fire in teenagers already. And then we add a lot of other stuff coming into us. I mean, a lot of distraction, and it's like running around in circles. That poor little hippo is just dancing away. So some other things, just how these are some other studies that show what attention fragmentation, if you break it down, it's exactly what it is. It's your thoughts are going all over the place, which makes it difficult to focus and interferes with encoding new memories. And this was similar to what Dave was talking to with about the social dilemma. The internal reports, that's really scary about that documentary. You know, you got people on the inside confessing, like, not that they're confessing, but they are confessing, like, we knew this was gonna happen. You know, it's like Pavlov's dog. We know if we put cheese over here and we ring the bell and there's no cheese, it's still gonna come because it might be there, right? It's the same kind of thing. So they really kind of did it on purpose, which is sad. And then this is something that I think as educators and parents, the scary part for our youngest, our most vulnerable students, for whatever reason, these issues are impacting their ability to learn more adversely than our kids who are already more well adjusted. So you throw in a few ACEs, 1, 2, 3, kids in trauma, throw in a smartphone, and that's going to more adversely affect those kids with multiple ACEs and living in daily trauma than the kids who are coming from a more well-adjusted, less adverse experiences in their lives. And it's also likely going to interfere with executive function across the board. And then the last foundational harm is addiction. Just that I got a little meme yesterday, totally sidebar, but this was really funny to me. Somebody sent me a TikTok. I didn't do this, but it was a bunch of old people at a slot machine, like doing this, because it was like Happy Easter. So every time somebody said Happy Easter, they were like liking it, like all day long. So like we're addicted to it. Your likes, you get your thumbs up, you get your thumbs up, and then you've got a thumbs down, like travesty. So we're addicted to it. I mean, and not just our kids. So this is for me the play recess advocate. This is really so sad. We ended up overprotecting our children in the real world while we underprotect them in the virtual world. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague here, Chad, who's going to talk to you about our survey. There you go.
Yeah, so we sent a survey out to parents and 286. 283 responded. Of that, roughly a third were multifamily, and I blew that data out. So you'll see numbers that exceed that at times, but that's because I actually did a little trick, we're adding some observations to account for the fact that parents were answering it from multiple schools. So these are the four things that they said that they were the most concerned about from a negative perspective, right? And they do in fact align with what we've seen before. I don't know if that's an influence of the book or not, but it certainly was the highest response items for concern. Whoa, that was not good. There we go. Is it the right button?
Yeah, that's the right. We all pay. Yeah.
So, most parents are concerned about phone usage, and want community support to manage that. Now, what we aren't showing here, that's kind of what that says in a nutshell. What we aren't showing here, but it's also good to note that they also saw the main benefits of this is having a phone for communication, the parents and family, social connections, and safety and emergency contacts. We saw this quite frequently as well. The major concerns have to do with these negative aspects that we talked about. I'm going to dig into which ones kind of rose to the top here in just a minute. The first was characterize how our parents orient themselves towards cell phone and social media usage. The key takeaway here is that across all the schools, right, at least 3/4 of families have a policy on either social media usage or cell phone usage. In other words, parents tend to approach cell phones and social media seriously and responsibly here in our community. There we go. Sorry. Families that have a policy on cell phones or social media usage tend to be more dissatisfied with school policy. Notably, actual usage of either of these things is insignificant with respect to their opinion on school policy. So in other words, parents voicing concerns are not typically the ones struggling to manage it themselves, and those who have policies, which are most, as we've seen, are less satisfied with the policies that we see in our schools. Okay. So here we see that parents tend to be concerned, parents that tend to be concerned about social media usage and phone usage tend to be more dissatisfied with school policy. And as we've seen, these aren't necessarily the ones who are experiencing the greatest usage in their homes either. Given the positive correlation that you see at the top line there between self-reported comfort.
I am so excited to see p-values on the slide in here. I'm wondering if you can explain the p-value for what that means and how we.
Yeah, so the lower means the more statistically significant it was in the analysis, meaning that it's really hard for me to say that there's no effect. Right? Those are really low p-values. Higher p-values is the opposite. It is a somewhat arbitrary cutoff, but it's. In this case, I'm not using alpha, I'm just using the straight p-value, yeah. So given the positive correlation between self-reported comfort, managing screen time and social media usage at the top that you see there, this also suggests that concerns tend to be focused on when children are out of parents' direct responsibilities, in other words, at school. So what schools are the parents most concerned about? The primary school and middle school parents tended to be generally satisfied with school policy. So they're in the y-axis, you actually see that's the average score that they assign to it right on a Likert scale. As you can see, primary middle school is about the same. The bulk of the parents put it in a satisfied rating on a scale of 1 to 4. High school was significantly lower, statistically significantly lower. So that means we probably need to be focusing on high school policy if we're really going to put our attention somewhere, right? If we're really concerned about parent satisfaction with those policies. What issues should we focus on? So looking at specific concerns, we see 3 items are cited most frequently. With the distributions of policy satisfaction, that by concern, they vary noticeably there. So you'll see, the ones most frequently cited are those ones that we opened with, right? There's some other ones there. And as far as the proportion of folks who are dissatisfied, right, that proportion goes up considerably for some of those. So for example, the, where is it? Inappropriate content there at the very bottom, right? Like, so in other words, a much smaller group of parents are really, really concerned about that. And that really, really drives, or is really, really associated, I should say, with their dissatisfaction with school policy. I did not dig into that particular group. I suspect that they're younger families. So remember the four concerns we originally raised? Well, those, plus inappropriate content, they appear to be the issues most strongly associated with dissatisfaction with the policy. Now, note that I grouped these a little bit differently during the formal analysis, but it is a combined sleep and focus here. But these are the same issues we opened the parents say slides with. So to bring home all of this data analysis, if I were to characterize the average parent described by the data, they will be the parent of a high schooler with a home policy governing cell phone and social media usage, and then with their community's high school policy to align more closely with their home standards, especially regarding concerns about social development issues, like attention, addiction and overuse, sleep, focus, and then a much smaller group cited inappropriate content, but that issue is a very strong driver among that group.
Ready. So the other, survey, so to speak, that we did was, asking other districts about their policies. And we've tried to summarize most of what we, come across here on this slide. Most schools restrict cell phone use during class. That's an easy one. A lot of schools have, specific storage areas for phones rather than leaving it up to the student where to put that. Smartwatches, same as a phone, under most policies that we saw. Earbuds and headphones are a kind of interesting one. There are legit uses for those sometimes, in the classroom, but, we saw pretty consistent that, you needed explicit permission to do that. For the most part, there are three main things, I guess. Distraction, like we talked about, these devices, interfere with development. Cheating, which is a whole different area you don't want to have, and privacy and security. So, there may be things that students are doing with the device that we don't want them to be doing in the building. So here's the, oh, come on, this is better than you will. Here's the recommendations for what we're supposed to do about all these problems. According to Height and many other researchers, he wants us to tilt the scale on that distinction between those real world things and those virtual world things. So less phones, but also more playing, more unsupervised time. He's in favor of, for example, like fewer rules at recess and playtimes, for kids to work things out. We saw a few examples that, they'll be linked in the report, but there are some initiatives that, put young kids on a program to engage with the real world around them, like go for a shopping trip by yourself or something, or like ride the bus, or a whole variety of things. And that's actually integrated into the school like a homework assignment, like, and you kind of progress on that. The third bullet is an interesting one. I don't know of anyone doing this, but it sounds like obvious. Don't give a smartphone as a child's first phone. You can call people and text people on a non-smartphone. And you get away from a lot of the apps and games and everything else. And when you do get a smartphone, it really shouldn't be until high school because of the point in time in the development of the neurology in the child's brain. A young child cannot resist the addictions and everything else as well as an older high school age student. And the last one is a lot about, this falls kind of equally on parents and on these platforms, which is that young children should not be able to open accounts and interact with these types of apps and websites until an older age. That's a tricky problem because, of course, you can just say, yes, I am 15 on any sign-up form. There are a lot of interesting technical and legal ramifications of age verification, but Height strongly advocates for age verification and raising the age on most things. I don't know if you know, right now, you can't sign up for things online unless you're 13. You can't enter into a contract with a Google, or for example, until you're 13. He recommends at least 16. And for the folks in this room, he's got recommendations. In addition to these, he's also got recommendations for local governments and other things if you want to check out the book. But his section on schools specifically recommends no phone use at school for all day. Put the phone somewhere where it is a known location, a controlled location, locker or pouch, but not in the classroom. And like I said, add those good things, more recess time, more unstructured play, shop classes, vocational training. There's a lot of correlation between the physical activity and development and the social development and the brain's development over time. So here's probably the slide you were waiting for this whole time. What should we do? Curtail. We bolded that word because we almost said ban all phones. That's a very tough recommendation to make. So we said, let's move towards phone free to the extent that we can. Promote those play-based learning things for students in all grades. That's actually something that is valuable for kids, K through 12. A recess for a kindergartner is not going to be the same as what a high school student needs, but they all still need those opportunities. As was apparent in the data, we found that it will be very important to engage the school and community even more. So on developing these policies, I think there are a lot of folks that feel pretty strongly. And there are important considerations to, well, if the kid doesn't have a phone, how do you do this or how do you do that? And so there are some ramifications here. We go into more detail on our report on that as well. And then, like Chad mentioned, the high school is probably the good starting point. I think the primary and middle school have kind of already a phone-free rule, and folks are pretty happy with that. And obviously, high school's the tricky one. So that's where the focus should start. And we have this slide here is some specific questions that you might want to take into account that will affect how well these recommendations go down in the community. But yeah, that's everything we wrote.
Could you go back to that one?
Yeah.
One more time?
Yeah. There were a lot of bullets that could have gone on here. We kind of last
Right.
minute threw this on here, but a big one is how are parents to communicate with a child? That was a very common reaction is, well, if my kid doesn't have their phone, how do I text them and tell them that swim practice was canceled or whatever? You don't want to have a situation where the school secretaries are like a messenger running around the building all day. So I don't know what the solution to that problem is. Did you have a specific question?
No, I just wanted to
Yeah.
read the last.
We can linger on it for a
Last one
second
here on
here.
the-
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for all of this multi-dimensional work coming at it from so many angles. The data is impressive. So I appreciate the different starting points and dimensions that you came up with. Thank you.
There's a lot to it. One of our unwritten recommendations is that there's still plenty to dig into here. It's not all settled. It's not all figured out. So.
My question is, down the road, I mean, we see proposals coming from the state, and I think I just read today that we might see a national, from Congress, so whether we might see a national policy on banning phones in schools. But, and so if that happens, it happens and we'll comply as appropriate. But I'm wondering, given the side effects that we're looking at, right? The isolationism, the depression, the lack of concentration, distraction, all of those things. How much do students, even if you would ban cell phones, are still kind of perhaps going to be impacted with those side effects with the laptops that we issue them? I know it cuts it down, it narrows it, we have software that, cuts them off from certain things, but in terms of some of the habitual processing that they're still able to do, that still feeds the dopamine craving in the mind, any thoughts on like whether if we would cut cell phones completely out, whether the laptops are still kind of
It might pick up
undercurrent?
some of the slack of that, but, as you know, the devices that the school issues are fairly well locked down and security wise. Many websites, they cannot even visit, so you're not gonna be on there texting or, there's probably kids that have figured this out, but the tricky thing here is that obviously the district control the devices that are issued, the district can control what happens in the building. But if I have my own personal device in my hand, I can be doing whatever on there. You can't control what apps I've installed or what websites I visit. And furthermore, that's just part of the student's day. The rest of the day around that, school can't have any control over that either. So it is very much a community issue. As far as laptops, from what I've seen, they're treated as a education tool primarily. It's not like buzzing and alerting and everything.
Thank you.
I think this is a very helpful question, right? Because there's a pattern that exists, and so if you pull out one of these things, it's sort of like, there's other different things that the energy will go to other paths to try to, phone is the least resistance today. We pull that out, effectively there'll be some other things, and you won't get all of that out, but, our ability to do what makes sense is what we consider.
I was also thinking about the obligation or the potential duty of, we ban cell phones, but we're still seeing the behaviors, the adverse behaviors that you identified here. Do we reach a point as educators where we have an obligation to intervene, as we would with any perhaps other type of addictive quality or harmful behavior? Are we going to get to a point where we have an affirmative obligation to do some kind of intervention to remedy that?
Yeah, that's a good thought. I don't know. I think back to like, the programs against, drinking and drugs when you're in school and stuff like that. But as far as, the book specifically, he recommends a wide variety of different, engagement opportunities that take the place, or make students feel less like they need to have their phone. Like make recess more interesting, like give them something to do, like make lunch period like social. I don't know. I don't know how that would be accomplished, but yes, taking away the bad things isn't enough. You have to provide a lot more of the good things as well.
Didn't we, in the middle school, Jen might be able to speak to this, when we banned cell phones during lunch, we put out little questions at the lunch tables or something, conversation starters, and maybe we talked about that.
Not ongoing. I don't know if it's.
It was just
happened
a-
at different moments, but right, that's a.
Yeah, ideas like that are
Engagement
good.
idea.
Book clubs with physical books,
Right.
stuff,
I was thinking that we
Yeah,
did
we had
that.
talked about that.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was thinking we did it, but
I think that I've got, for today's point that he said at the beginning is that this is not a one and done. Even when we talk about implementation considerations, there are so many conversations. There will be an absence. There has to be something to replace it. And what we were all talking about before we started tonight was that this is going to need to engage the community, and there will need to be thoughts about what do you do at lunchtime. Well, not only our kids don't have phones at lunchtime as middle schoolers, but at high school they do. And you're gonna take away their one thing on how they connect with one another. You better engage the students. And there's some really good models out there that are doing it. That's the good thing. We're not the early adopters. We're not gonna be the late adopters, but, you know, you don't wanna wait until you get a state college that so you have to do it, but, I mean, I just kinda, I feel like Dave's getting all the questions, and really, it's not a one and done.
That reminds me of one of the big points, you know, he's got the last section of the book is like recommendations for this community, recommendations for that community. But the beginning of it is that all of these things are collective action problems. Like, it's very difficult to be the only one doing it. And that's being a district and that's being a parent because, you know, I'm the only kid in my grade without the phone. The answer to that is,
In all of seventh grade.
right,
only
the
one.
answer to that is, no, I personally know a group of people and we've all agreed that our kids won't have phones. So, you know, go talk to these 15 other kids that I know, you know, and there's like hashtag this and there's organized groups about like getting parents to band together. Because, you know, you, like I said, you don't want to be the first one or the only one, and it's nice to have, you know, other people have your back and are trying to do the same thing.
I also feel like this conversation 5 years ago, we're thinking about involving people and different groups in the conversation would have been different. Now we're seeing the problems, kids themselves see the problems and will put themselves on a diet,
Yeah.
take off their notifications, you know, go to camp where cell phones aren't allowed because they can, you know, have time where they're doing great things and they're not allowed to have a phone. Nobody is. So they're not the,
One
you
of
know,
the
so.
sad stories in the book is, you know, kids self-reporting that I wish I could quit this, you know? Like, this is just taking my whole life but I can't stop doing it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, but it's serious, it's serious.
It's very serious
very
and
serious.
we appreciate it, it's powerful. And so when the CAC had the conversation and we got to have a sneak peek of this information, we said there's just many different avenues and levels of this that you could take. There's an in-school question, there's an at-home question, there's a, you know, how do you empower students question. And so appreciate the good work to bring up the conversation and spark future conversations.
I also really like your idea about getting students involved on any task force or anything. I happened to be listening to NPR a couple days ago and thinking about this presentation. There was this whole conversation around digital literacy. And there was, I don't know if anybody listened to it, there was I don't know if they called it a club, a digital literacy club that kids were a part of. And it was about suggestions peer to peer about, how to be smart with their smartphones. And I thought, oh, who's gonna join that in high school? But apparently this was very successful. And they made it fun and, you know, just, I don't know. They have better ideas than our generation.
Ideally, in schools, instruction and interaction with peers and engaging learning would be what replaces the phone. And that's what we're hoping, you know, and play on the playground and interacting in the cafeteria and sitting with different people you may not know. But so that's the hope, that they don't need, so it is becoming more and more difficult to compete with technology.
No, it is not a fair fight. That's a good thought. Ilya said it's not a fair fight.
Thanks, Ilya.
True. I think what we have normally done with our CAC studies, and we will continue, of course, we always have them on our website, all the way back, so you're welcome to go back and take a look. Often we move right into the next session of the take your study and build off that. I think what you said at the very beginning is this one, it's gonna go off in different directions, and it's not something we're gonna, you know, we'll have various ways we're going to address this.
It could lead to another CAC study. We talked about different opportunities to engage students and then engage families. So lots of ideas being generated. And so what I can
Right.
guarantee is it will be utilize for future planning, because there are definitely next steps to happen.
Absolutely.
Very helpful.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
all.
Thank you.
For what it's worth, I appreciate that the board even initiated this, you know. I tell people like, oh, I'm on this committee studying this thing, they're like, oh my God, your district is so great.
Well, you all step right into it too. I mean, it helps to have a number of people, first of all, want to be on the CAC, commit to a 2-year to study program, and then really dig in.
Was the movie Social Dilemma or the book new to all the committee members, or had a lot of you all?
Me, all of it.
You know, me.
Yeah.
Both.
Well, the book was brand new because it just came out, but.
Yeah.
Has anyone seen?
This is the one.
Yeah, when I watched
I
the
haven't
social
read the book,
dilemma,
but I've seen Social Dilemma. Have you guys?
I was gonna say, when I saw it, the thing that stood out to me is the people who did work on this would not allow their children to use it.
Right.
And that was one of the things that kind of
Yeah.
talked about the
That says
intentional,
Yeah, that says a
known
lot.
kind of intent about it. It reminds me about cigarettes years and years ago.
Yeah,
It's sort of
very much.
like, and it's a
Like
much
all the
more
same
pervasive
level.
impact. But I don't know that they'll be sued or kind of, class action lawsuits given,
Apple.
who their friends are, at this point.
Hey, but then the show Adolescence came out since that too. You guys have seen that? That's a powerful. But anyway.
All right, thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for changing the time. Yeah.
I think somebody just adjusted it.
Yeah. Thanks.
We are working our way through
I can tell
many
when my nose starts
presentations, all of them wonderful. This one will be our World Language Department,
Yay.
and we are gonna talk about new books.
Textbook adoption, yes. Thank you, Todd. Start, my name is Liz Knopf. I'm the department chair for 1 through 12 Spanish, I almost said K through 12, and Latin and French. So we're going to talk about our textbook adoption, the research we did, other books we looked at, and what we decided on. So as we went through this process of textbook adoption, which it had been a really long time, it had been like 13 years, maybe 14. So we were all really excited to look at some new and more modern materials. Focus on all modes of communication, interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational. Balanced approach to all communication skills, receptive with both reading and listening, productive with writing and speaking, thinking of the output the students have to have. And a variety of tools that teachers can use to enhance student learning and success. He's like, why? Okay. Main areas of focus, cultural material presents a variety of experiences and perspectives from our global community. Materials within the resource are adaptable for a variety of student needs, practical real life uses of the language. And remember, we're 3 departments in one, so everybody was looking at a lot of different things, and then we would collaborate and come together. And Eric helped us come together on that too, and helped us make decisions, etc. Okay, good. Okay, alignment to standards. Department philosophy. Any resource is a tool to assist us in teaching and to assist students in achieving the standards. We're never going to rely solely on our textbooks. We're all generating our own materials and creating our own activities, etc. All texts align with proficiency standards set by the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, ACTFL, which is the basis for state standards around the country, including Ohio. Textbook series and advanced readers are written with a vision of preparing students for AP programs for each language, which is the end goal. Interesting to think about in 7th grade, when they're going to 7th grade, they're making a decision that will carry them all the way through 12th grade if they take AP Latin, French, or Spanish, which many of our children do. So here we have Spanish, which is appropriate because I am the Spanish teacher. For 1 through 6, we have No me digas, el mundo de Pepita y vamos. The elementary teachers were very diligent. They had less resources than the rest of us to look at. But this is what they decided upon. For 7th and 8th grade, and I believe French is the same, correct, Julia? They are using the Somos series. Spanish 1 through 4, we looked at 4 series, and this is the one that we decided upon. Senderos textbook series has a great digital platform.
and AP Spanish Triángulo Apreciado, a digital text. I used to use a paper, but I do like paper, because the paper's gotten really expensive, so now we do the digital. So for future focus skills for Spanish, interpersonal communication skills in the target language, I'm always trying to find different ways to get them to speak Spanish, and this textbook does a great job incorporating the vocabulary and the grammar, and with interesting and engaging speaking prompts for them. Senderos aligns with the AP Spanish expectations and skills and trickles them down. Outstanding and authentic listening activities to build listening comprehension. That was one of the huge problems with the textbook we currently have. It's so outdated. The listening series doesn't even work anymore. Fully integrated reading, writing, speaking, listening, and technology skills. Text series is scaffolded in order to provide early on support to build more independent skills. There's flexibility in the resources available that allow teachers to pick and choose to meet their instructional needs. Grammar is taught conceptually and used in context. A lot of contextual grammar, which is good for me. I like to teach grammar. I actually think it's fun. So for differentiation, we have print materials that provide both graphic and written explanations and supports. Digital access, as I said, a great digital platform allows for differentiation and remediation. A lot of the kids will make their own materials. They'll make a Quizlet. They'll have to do a lot less of this with this new series. Digital access allows for individual practice outside of class time. Additional grammar support explanations are offered for challenging concepts such as the subjunctive, for example. What extras do we have with the Senderos series, which is the high school series, levels 1 through 4? The Super Sight Plus, Student Edition, My Vocabulary Study Tool. Instead of making Quizlets, they can use this to improve their personal vocabulary word banks. Even in AP, I'm always trying to get them to add more to their personal word bank, and so they can take the words they learned in class and use them in their speaking. Support outside of school is needed. Additional partner practice available. Working in a pair is always great for language acquisition. Activities are assignable digitally. Animated grammar tutorials, which they're kind of silly, but the kids end up thinking they're really fun and they remember them. And Pantalla provides authentic video clips, fotonovela filmed in Spain and Mexico, prime, listen, and repeat vocabulary tutorials. Next, we're going to talk about Wyoming middle schools a little bit. Spanish, 7th and 8th graders will be using Somos 1 Novice, which is all digital, teaching Spanish for proficiency, not just to be able to conjugate verbs, like I'm sure all of you did when you were taking world languages. Main areas of focus in middle school, we have high frequency vocabulary, comprehensible input, which has been a huge part of their curriculum for the past 10 years. Reading and storytelling, culture, communication skills, communication over grammar. And they really, really liked this series. And it really helped because as they looked deeper into it for Spanish, French was looking into it as well. So that was helpful for them to be able to collaborate on that. Instructional approaches, comprehensible input, CI-based, which is very familiar for them, and they've all been trained on CI, grammar taught in context, developing and using novice level skills in reading and writing, assessment through proficiency. So what are future focus skills? What do we want them to get out of this as they continue their language acquisition journey? Critical thinking and problem solving, communication, collaboration, cultural competence and global awareness, being a better global citizen, being aware of other cultures, creativity and innovation, digital literacy, social, emotional learning and empathy, adaptability and growth mindset. So modernizing these texts is great for us too. A lot of our students go on to continue to study world languages in college, and we're hoping they can make as much of a connection with the language as possible as they're going through, and they'll want to continue. For differentiation, because Somos Uno Novice is built around comprehensible input, CI, and student-centered learning, it naturally allows for a wide range of learner needs, abilities, and interests. The curriculum is designed to meet learners where they are, using simple, high-frequency language that is made understandable through gestures, visuals, storytelling, which is all typical of CI, repetition, and scaffolded readings. Leveled embedded readings allow novice low and novice mid students to access the same material with just right support. And that all lines up with the actual standards, these different levels of proficiency. Paired and group work allows for peer scaffolding. Stronger students can model language for others. Assessments are performance-based and focused on communication and perfection. You don't have to say it perfectly to be understood, and your objective is being able to communicate. Allows for teacher flexibility to adjust pacing, add support, extend stories, and simplify tasks depending on student needs. Here are some extras, lots of extras for this textbook series. They probably won't even be able to do all of these things. There's so many, especially the first couple years as they're getting used to using a new textbook series, which takes some time. For primary Spanish, they are going to do a combination of No Me Digas and El Mundo de Pepita and Vamos. Heavy reading component, anything else you want to say about that?
Just lots of storytelling and games and engaging activities that would pair well with what we're currently doing, but we're also shifting. Our curriculum is shifting with the shift in our schedule, and so we're adapting to help the students. But a lot of it is listening comprehension, and through CI, comprehensible input. And so we're gonna kind of take all three resources and pair it with what we're currently doing, just to make a really great curriculum.
Thank you. So for Wyoming Primary School Spanish, we have communication around concrete, everyday topics such as food, clothing, seasons, descriptions. And some of these seem really basic, but they're the things that they end up retaining and remembering when they're even in the upper levels in the high school. And they fall back on those when they need to for communication. Development of linguistic proficiency, exposure to a range of products, practices, and perspectives. That's definitely actful language from target language communities. Fostering an appreciation and inquisitive attitude towards target language cultures and communities. This is for alignment to standards. And future focus skills. Contain components that incorporate critical thinking, communication and collaboration, hands-on, high engagement, very important to keep them engaged, especially in a 40-minute lesson for little kids. High engagement learning experiences, digital literacy, and media awareness. For differentiation, all programs, particularly VAMOS, provide lessons with suggestions for differentiation and interventions to address the learning needs of all students, to make it accessible, to make it enjoyable for them. And just to have some differentiation, having the longer class style and more time.
Yes, and really, it's all three of them allow for differentiation, and they're editable resources that we can, as experts in our curriculum and experts of our individual students, we can modify as needed for extension.
Okay, next we're gonna talk about Latin. I'm not gonna talk about Latin. I can only talk about Italy. Todd's gonna talk about Latin. You're very welcome.
So in Latin, we're kind of divided into a couple of different series that we're looking at. So through 7th grade through Latin 4, we are looking to adopt the new edition of the series that we have been using, the Cambridge Latin course. But the new edition has a lot of new features and updates that I'm very excited about. In Latin 4 and AP, which are both, Latin 4 becomes more literature focused than kind of textbook reading focused. So we're looking at there, in addition to the Cambridge Latin course textbook for Unit 4, adding in a book from another series called Subarani, but just using their book 3, which is a literature survey. And really in that book, there's enough content to keep me busy for years and years and years. It's a very rich resource, and I'm looking forward to digging into it and using it, and giving students the opportunity to explore it a little bit and decide kind of their own path and what they want to read about and what they want to explore. There's a lot to do in that book. And then AP, this was actually a very convenient time for us to be doing this. The AP Latin syllabus is changing for next year. So we get we get one new author, we get rid of one author, which conveniently means new books for everybody. So looking at those two books, Virgil's selections and Pliny's selections, which cover the required readings of the AP syllabus, and then add some because the new AP syllabus is adding in kind of student and teacher choice texts, which is why we'll pull the Superati book into AP as well, so that we have all of that kind of choice curriculum as we work through it. The skills that we were focusing on were a more intensive reading focus, Spanish and French. We're preparing students for proficiency in a modern world, in a modern environment where there are people to talk to. We don't have that as much in life. So we focus on accessing the language and the experience and the voice of people, from historical people. We want to focus on the reading all the way through. We add in writing and oral proficiency and things like that, but our heavy focus is reading. Seeing all of our language skills in the context of language as Romans used it is important. And these series that we're using provide that with lots of opportunities to practice. One of the things I love about the Cambridge Latin Course series is that there is a lot to read. And we can read and read and read and read every single day, and we won't get through everything. There are stories that we skip. There are stories that I summarize so that we can get through them a little bit faster and get on to other things because it provides such an ample amount of practice. The vocabulary is structured around high frequency and high interest words that allow us to have more effective reading. Those high frequency words become a big focus. Mentioning like the new AP syllabus, for the first time in my experience with it, it's actually coming out with a vocab list for us of 1,000 words that every student taking AP must know. And conveniently, those are all words that are part of that series already. Most of our kids going into AP next year are already good with those words because they've had that exposure through this series. Language is presented progressively. One of the things I don't like about how Latin programs used to work is that you get all of Latin grammar day one, and then you kind of sift through it and try to figure it out as you're just swimming in forms and endings, and you don't know what anything means, and why we call this that, and why do we have all these letters over here. We don't do that anymore. We do things one little bit at a time, allowing students to master a topic and a grammatical skill before they move on to the next one. And then our cultural topics in this series are presented through a variety of lenses. We look at them historically, but we also get them presented to us through ancient literature, usually in translation in the Cambridge series, that kind of highlights the Roman voice about those topics. And we also get an archaeological lens. What have we found and discovered that allows us to understand that piece better? For the differentiation component, Cambridge Latin Course provides a lot of features that can provide immediate vocabulary and comprehension support, which I'll talk about a little bit more with the extras. A lot of vocabulary support on the online resource that provides derivative information. So how can we tie that vocabulary not only to English, but it provides derivational information in French and Spanish as well, if those are languages that a student is aware of. And having gone through Wyoming, they've got enough Spanish that sometimes having those connections and seeing how the Latin evolves into Spanish or into French, it interests a lot of our students, and it gives them something else to link to. A lot of practice tools in the Cambridge Latin course that allow students to isolate and rehearse problematic content that they're struggling with. And Cambridge Latin course also has audio support that will provide read aloud of any of the textbook content there on their website. The AP texts have a lot of different presentations of their vocabulary, terminology, grammar, all the things that hopefully my students have learned as they went through Latin 3 and Latin 4 in preparation for AP. But if they didn't, they can look it up without even having to admit that they don't know what to do. And then vocabulary frequency lists. So the vocabulary in those books is arranged by how frequent those words are used, so that if a student wanted to focus on what are the words that I have to know every single day, there's a list for that. What are the words I need to know maybe once a week? There's a list for that. what are the words I need to know for this author, but not this author? There's lists for that. So they can focus on their own specific needs as they work through. And then the Superani text that will be using for 4 and AP does some good tiered reading. So with more complex literature, breaking it down where you kind of get a first step, maybe get things rearranged or get things highlighted in a specific way to kind of guide through the text. And then those supports back off as they go. So that's built into the book right from the beginning. Language notes are embedded with the text as well, so that any grammatical information that is a little bit less frequent that can be highlighted is there, and then a lot of questions and notes and things throughout that text. With the Cambridge course, which will be our primary focus, the new software that's developed for this new series provides a lot of different tools. All this, the textbook is there exactly as it looks in print, but also in some different formats that allow students to interact with it. So they'll be able to click on things and get information on a specific word, on a specific sentence, to hear it aloud. And they can then look at what they're doing, follow the grammatical notes, and get straight into practice tools and rehearsal kind of things as they work through it. And then on my end, on the teacher end, teaching notes are attached to everything. So if there's a picture, there's a teaching note on that picture. For each story, there's pre-reading and things attached directly to it. So I don't have to go somewhere else and look at it in another book to figure out what their intention was with a specific item. The learning activities through that software are assignable. They provide me with progress reports. They provide students with an opportunity to see their own growth on those assignments as they go along. The Cambridge Latin course also has a good support network in the United States through the North American Cambridge Classics Project. They have developed dozens of resources to accompany this textbook series, and they are working on the new series now. So those aren't out yet, but they will be. And I've seen previews of a few of them, and so those will be their support. And the AP texts have workbooks available and pre-formatted notebooks available for students who need that extra bit of support. So it's French time, and I can't talk about French, so we'll pass it off to Julie.
Thank you. Okay. So French, we've chosen to go with New Somme, which is by the same company as the Spanish 7th and 8th grade Somos. So I won't actually probably read over the focus skills. It's all going to line up exactly with the Spanish 7th and 8th grade. But I will say that it's not a translation at all. It's made by French speakers, and it's really amplifying voices from around the French-speaking world, and Senegal and Haiti and Quebec and France and all over. So yeah, it's not at all a translation, but it's going to be really compatible, I think, with the Spanish curriculum.
So do you have any questions for us?
It was very thorough. Yeah, it was good.
And I think they're all back on the counter.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Are they?
And will be for 30 days, correct?
Yeah.
That's exciting to get to upgrade.
It is.
Yeah, there's a lot of tools that are,
It's been a very.
a lot of tools that you just didn't have access to, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Interactive piece, right?
Yeah, because we were due to have done this, and then COVID happened, and it was not a priority. And then I think we got deferred for other departments, which were higher priority. So we're very happy to be here and getting it done. That's good.
Okay.
Thank you for all
We're
your.
glad it's our turn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you were.
So all of them are, well, tell me where there's not hard copy text.
So I know right now, not sitting back here, are the two AP textbooks that I mentioned. Because with the syllabus being new, those are not yet available for review copies. Because the syllabus wasn't fully published until middle of March. And so they had the books ready with anticipation of what the syllabus was going to be based on the draft that was shared in the spring. But they couldn't start, they didn't want to go to print until it was clear and definitive. And so now it's in like a final edit. So those aren't here yet. And Cambridge Latin course is also in development of the new series. So books 1 and 2 are here, but books 3 and 4 have not yet been read.
And every student will get one, or they're resourced in the classroom kind of thing?
I think we're all planning on, classroom sets. So grab them when you're in there, leave them when you go, but having the online resources for all of the series, they'll have access anytime they need it at home. Or like in my class now, if you need, we have enough extras that if you need to take one home, take it home, keep it, and then bring it back.
Or they'll come get them during study hall a lot. They don't like to lug around books either anymore, so it works for them too.
I'm glad there's just some connection too, with the hard.
Oh, definitely.
Thank you very
All right,
much.
thank you. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. We'll continue on, and I know this will be also an exciting and I'm sorry, I've heard this in finance. Get out your Kleenex. It's bad. Okay, we will next have the state biennium budget update.
Yeah, just give me 2
Um,
seconds to get set up.
Absolutely. As we, see where we're headed.
I think I'm gonna church chair.
You like chairs, check it out.
Some notes, take to this.
Okay, yes.
No.
Nope.
Not a lot of applause coming after this one, I don't think. A little different than our other presentation. So, we are gonna take a few minutes tonight and just talk about the biennium budget update and how it relates to public school funding for public schools across Ohio and here in Wyoming. And it's important that we recognize that this is the information that is available today, 8/20, April 21st. Things are moving fast, changing fast. And so we're gonna talk about some of the things that have already changed and what we might expect to see in the next few weeks. So why are we even talking about the biennium budget? The state budget's in 2-year cycles. And we're wrapping up a biennium budget and getting ready to move to the next one. So you'll see it some different dates in here. I'll try to just make sure I talk about when we reference things that are happening this year, fiscal year 25, we're wrapping up fiscal year 25, and then moving into next year, 26 and 27. So really, that's all we have. When we think about our revenue projections on our 5-year forecast, really all we have from the state are, what we know to be law in the next biennium budget. But as we're going to learn tonight, that some of the proposals in this year's biennium budget impact some of our other revenue categories. And just sort of a quick refresher here, we have 3 material revenue sources in our general fund. Our most material revenue source is real estate taxes. That's where we get most of our general fund revenue at 41%. Second is income tax at 31% and state funding at 20%. So we are talking about a $5.5 million revenue source here in the district. And we have been flatlined, our state funding has been flatlined since fiscal year 19. So we're on a 6-year run of seeing no increase every year in state funding. And at least in the recent biennium and the 2 recent bienniums was the implementation of a new formula. So the new Fair School Funding Plan, but here in Wyoming, I think we say that it's not fair or funded because we've been on this flat line since fiscal year 19. So the planned phase 3, we've been through phases 1 and 2, but again, immaterial in Wyoming because none of that has generated additional revenue for us. What was supposed to happen is that in this next biennium was the planned phase in of 3. It was supposed to be four phase ins. Okay, so what was supposed to happen is phase 3. And so we'll kind of get what's being proposed is happening. But again, just important for us to understand that we've been on the guarantee since prior to the Fair School Funding Plan at this kind of 5.9, 5.8 million. And again, just want to mention that in that same time span, spending toward vouchers increased from 346 million to almost $1 billion. So when we hear about the state not being able to fund some of these provisions,
the state is able to find significant revenue to fund vouchers. So where are we in the process? This process started in February. Governor DeWine introduced his version, and we'll talk about the versions that we've seen. Then it moves to the House, and the House has a version. And then we get to the Senate, and the Senate has a version. And then we kind of have these three proposals out there, the governor's version, the House version, and the Senate's version. And then all those go to conference committee, and that will happen in June. And sometime between when conference committee, late May and June 30th, we have to have a budget. Ohio law requires that the governor sign the budget by June 30th. And in previous bienniums, there have been some years where there were extensions. But for the most part, we're going to start July 1st with a budget. And so, we've talked about different funding models. So this isn't Ohio's first rodeo with looking at different formulas. So I've been in school treasury financial leadership for 25 years, and I think I've been through somewhere between 8 and 10. I've honestly kind of lost track. And so DeRolf, was sort of generating some additional revenue early on in here. And we've been through some freezes, all different names, bridges, all different components. We've been through a number of scenarios. Public school funding in Ohio has had many, many different scenarios. But in 2017, there was a bipartisan collaborative effort that generated an input-based model that was the Fair School Funding Plan. Again, it generated additional revenue for 612 of the 612 public school districts in Ohio. It generated additional revenue for 600 of them. Only 11 of us were on the guarantee. So we were one out of 11 that was on the guarantee right out of the gate from the implementation of the Fair School Funding Model. And that our situation specifically was about this issue about capacity. So the Fair School Funding Plan was about inputs. We're going to look at real live data, what it costs to educate a kid, and we're going to do this research and dump it all in there. And then school funding has always been declared a shared responsibility in Ohio. So we got to figure out a way to measure of that, what it costs to educate a kid, how much of that is the state share and how much of that is the local share. So there's this sort of capacity thing. And then there's some add-ons for special ed or students of poverty. But it's this capacity piece that has always kind of been a thorn in our side in the formula, because every capacity measure, Wyoming looks wealthy, whether it's income, whether it's property tax. We look very wealthy, and because of that capacity measure, we are not a school district that receives additional funds under the formula, okay? So when we think about, as fair as it may have been to the 600 of the 612, apparently not any school funding formula is perfect, because it really doesn't work for everybody, because there was just this little capacity thing that we just couldn't figure out a way to get new money to everybody. Okay, so that's kind of in the thorn.
But we didn't lose money.
We didn't lose money. They put us on the guarantee. Okay, and that's important.
And they could have come up with 11 separate plans. for
Yes,
us.
but it makes
But
it
they did
difficult to
not.
call it a model at that point.
Right.
By capacity, they mean we have the capacity to be okay without help. until
Yes.
We didn't give it.
Without
Yes.
more help.
Yes,
than we're
that's
getting.
exactly it. So, and that's a great way to put it. So we're gonna devise this formula. We're gonna say it costs this. And then there's this formula that of this main number, how much of each school district plugs itself into that calculation, and how much of that are you responsible for in your local district? And there are a number of capacity inputs into the capacity measure. It used to just be property tax, and then they added another layer of income tax, and as you might imagine, that didn't help us. Okay, so that didn't help the equation at all. We were almost better off with the property tax calculation. But so all of every single model up here, when you kind of look at the history of school funding, at least since the 90s, all of these have had a capacity measure. They were called different things, they look different, but every single formula had some version of a capacity measure in it. Okay. So what did the governor do? So right out of the gate, he said, okay, well, in the defense of this, from the governor's perspective, was we can't afford the Fair School Funding Plan. Now remember, we shared before that we might debate that a bit, but the answer was we can't really afford to continue implementing, continue the phase in, continue updating the inputs. And so it's important to just remember, though, that the Fair School Funding Plan has inputs in a lot of different ways. So there's a way to update the inputs to talk about the cost. So let's update teacher salaries and benefits and, inflation, cost of materials, the inflationary price of textbooks. We know those things have gone up, inflationary pressure on technology, utilities, all of those things go into calculating the cost to run a district. And of course, we know those costs have gone up, right? They didn't update those inputs. But they did update the inputs on the capacity calculation of how much we're required to pay. So what have property taxes done, over this time, up or down? This is the there we go, up, good. What about income for the most part here in Wyoming? Up, and enrollment has statewide down. Here in Wyoming, yeah, we're a stable city here, right? I mean, we go like this, but we don't go like this, right? We look at our enrollment a lot of different ways. So when you update when you don't update the inputs, but you do update the capacity, the answer to that is obviously everyone is going to get less because you're not increasing the cost. We're just increasing the amount of the cost you pay. So that no one is getting additional money. And you see that in the traditional public school. Those are red. That's bad. Red is bad, right? Okay.
It's intentionally complicated.
It's super complicated. Traditional public schools, and we're only on the governor's proposal. Okay. So the governor's proposal over the biennium, less money for traditional public schools. Okay. Look whose numbers aren't red. Scholarships are vouchers. Okay. Those numbers say 8.2 and 7.6. Okay. Yes. Traditional public schools are negative 0.4 and negative 0.5. Okay. Negative 15.8% increase over the biennium. Okay. So there is some money somewhere for public education. There's clearly a decision. Oh, yeah, there's clearly a decision about where it's being driven. Okay.
And I think it's important to mention too, every time, the number of students in public education is about 90% of Ohio.
90% of students in Ohio are served in Ohio's public schools. That is accurate. Okay. So we talked a little bit about kind of the history of school funding. And so the governor, when we don't update the inputs, but we didn't pause, or we do update the capacity pieces, of course, everybody got less. We saw that on the first chart. But the next piece of the governor's proposal, remember, we were on the guarantee, right? Since fiscal year 19. The next piece of the governor's proposal was to reduce the guarantee calculations. So remember we started at 11, right? Now there are 225 of us on the guarantee. And the governor's proposal had a reduction, a phased-in reduction, 5% in year 1 and 10% in year 2. And you put those reductions into kind of a fake model, I guess. And now you see that state share as a base cost is driven over this biennium on an average down to about 32% of the state share of base cost. Okay. It was 42% when DeRolf was declared unconstitutional. So we are not moving in the right direction. Okay. Currently, our state share in the calculation is 24.2. We're driven down in the governor's model to about 13. Okay, the state minimum is 10. You are not allowed to go below 10%. Okay, and some of our neighboring districts are there. Madeira is there, Marymount is there, Indian Hill is there. 10% minimum state share. Okay, so that's the governor's version. Couple other things happened, or a couple other points to just hit. Again, no updates and not updating the input. Did update the capacity measures, reduce the guarantee, 5% and then 10%. And that's about $850,000 in the biennium. So just over the next 2 years. But if I extrapolate that out over the life of the 5-year forecast, well, the impact is about $2.5 million for us. So this is not a small change. It may seem like this reduction in the guarantee is kind of a small thing. It isn't. If that was extrapolated out, and I have to assume in the forecast that we wouldn't be getting that money back, okay? And again, we've been on the guarantee since prior to the inception of the Fair School Funding Plan, and current year, 477 school districts in Ohio have a higher per pupil base cost than we do. So when you put all that data in, of the 600 plus, 477 of them get more state funding than we do in terms of fixed costs, so 78%. We're in the bottom quarter of the district.
Are they, is that just a mistake that they updated capacity but not the other data inputs?
No.
Anybody want to take a guess?
Kind of asking that, like where I know the answer, but it
No,
doesn't make
no.
any sense.
No.
Well, it
Like-
does, right? I mean,
Well, it does
I
because
mean,
it
it's-
generates money back to the taxpayers, which is one of their plans. They want to.
But Okay,
It
but
also
how
funnels
do
the money.
you rationalize that? Like if it,
How
like that's not logical.
I don't think they can.
Say logic, you got that right.
Logical doesn't matter.
I don't know that, I don't think logical is the answer. Okay, but we're still on the governor's plan, okay? So
Good
this is
question.
still the governor's plan. So that was all the governor's piece, all right? So the governor approved that and then the whole entire thing went to the House, okay? So where are we on the timeline? We're done with the first row, okay? Now we go to the House. Okay, so we have the good, it's not great, but better, okay? Guarantees maintained. Okay, so, us and our 224 friends, the guarantees are maintained. There is a small increase for public school districts. Statewide, remember when we looked at that chart under the governor's plan and that line was red? At least now it's positive, a 1.2% in the first year and another 1% in the second year. And we are projected to have a small increase, okay? So remember, we've been on the guarantee for 6 years. We haven't seen an increase. So at least under the House's proposal, they have given us a little increase. They have done that because they have completely paused the fair school funding plan. They said, and that's really not working. So pause that. We're gonna kind of have this bridge. So not sure what, we're not sure what's coming next. But the bridge is maintain the guarantees, small increases for public schools in Ohio, small increase for Wyoming. Okay? That's the good.
But, okay.
The bad is there's this cash balance provision. And this cash balance provision requires the county budget commission to reduce our property tax revenue if we have a cash balance that exceeds this 30% calculation. Okay, so they look at our cash balance when we close our fiscal year on June 30th. They look at our cash balance, and if that cash balance exceeds 30% of your expenditures, they will reduce our property tax revenue the following year. So if they don't like our cash balance, as determined by the amount of money that we spend, they will reduce our tax revenue. Okay? I'm gonna explain that in a second, so hang on. And then things we're kind of not sure about, moving from a 5-year forecast, so we do the 5-year forecast twice a year, to now a 3-year forecast. Not 100% sure what the end game of that is from the legislator's perspective. The 5-year forecast gives us a lot of good data and helps us plan. I think it helps our union leadership plan. I know that it helps us it helps us work collaboratively in our stewardship pillar. I think it's a good tool, and I think we've used it as a good tool. I don't know what the end game is in moving it to 3 years, so
Maybe
not sure.
less information for people to get worked up about when they see the losses over
Maybe,
time.
maybe. And then, the bridge formula, while we like all the components at the top, we don't know where we're bridging to. And, you know, I've always kind of been a believer that any formula is better than no formula, because when there's no formula, then you're subject to the whims of whatever is happening up at the State House. And that's difficult for us. So even, I think some formula, even if we're not on it, is easier to forecast, right? So, so that's why I kind of put that down there in the not sure category, okay? So let's learn a little more about the bad and what that means. So this cash balance provision requires the county budget commission to reduce tax revenue, okay? This is the single largest property tax reduction measure since House Bill 920 in 1976. 1976, there was incredible inflation, okay? So home values were rising, and the Ohio legislature said, all right, we got to do something about this. And so they adopted House Bill 920, which is the measure that I always talk about when I say that property values go up and the effective millage rate goes down, so that we collect about the same number of taxes. And remember, we have recent evidence of that when our values went up 29% and we only collected a 3% increase in property tax revenue, okay? This House bill was unveiled and passed in a 10-day span. Okay, so the single largest property tax reduction measure since 1976 was introduced in the House and passed out of the House in less than 10 days. That's kind of a big deal, okay? We began this fiscal year, the year that we're in, with a 33.41% cash balance. Okay, so remember, the target is 30%. We began this fiscal year. If this would have been in place, that would have resulted in the county budget commission requiring the county auditor to reduce our property tax by 1.16 mils, or about $530,000. Okay? This completely ignores the voters and the will of the voters in your school district. And in most cases, every time you pass a levy, I mean, we know that we're at the end of our levy cycle, and in the next few years, we're going to be back on the ballot for something, some operating levy. And so at 30%, the result is that the consequence of this is that immediately after we would pass that millage, we would be above 30% and it would be reduced. So the unintended or maybe intended consequence is that we would be on the ballot much more frequently. Because as soon as you collect millage, it's reduced. As soon as you collect it, it's reduced. As soon as you were kind of walking this tightrope of having enough cash balance to be able to operate your district. To the next point, cash balance is key to our financial stewardship. We've had a cash balance policy that was crafted many years ago, and we've crafted that policy because we know what our cash needs to be in order to meet our payroll, our benefit, our contract obligations. I mean, we have a very cyclical operation in terms of the school year, but that's not how our revenue comes in. So you have to have at least some level of cash balance to be able to meet your cash flow needs. And so we studied that at length and we adopted a cash balance policy. We've been using that cash balance policy and working towards our next operating levy. Okay. Again, and this would ignore all of that benchmark planning of local school districts. I mean, many districts across the state have cash balance policies that are specific to their needs. I mean, this is local control 101. What do we do that works for our school community? Okay. And so thinking about our current forecast, I said we started the year at 33, but we're projected right now to end fiscal year 25 below 30. And so we know that we have been drawing down our cash, and we've been talking about this for a couple years. We've been drawing down our cash, pointing towards a new operating levy for collection in 2028. So running something in 27. But had we been reduced at the beginning of this fiscal year, it would have just accelerated all of that. It either accelerates your need for new revenue, or it accelerates your need to reduce expenditures. Neither of those are good, right? Because we've been working very hard since our last levy in 2017 to live in this cycle and be respectful of our taxpayers and try and stay off the ballot as long as possible. But all of a sudden, under this new provision, anytime that you achieve financial stewardship and have some savings, immediately penalized. Okay, so this is a really big deal. Okay. And so we have advocated and sent testimony. The legislature's on spring break this week. And so the House has passed this. This has happened. Okay. Oh gosh, I forgot one. I'm sorry. This last one is really important. Cash balance is a critical component of our bond rating. And we just issued bonds and went through that process for a new bond rating. We have a high rating, and a high rating, we know, drove down our interest rate, right? And that ends up being less interest paid by our taxpayers over the 37-year life of the debt. When we got our rating, a measure in the rating recommendation or the rating analysis from Moody's was that factors that could lead to an upgrade, have your cash balance at 50%. So it's required to go to AA1 or AAA, but no one in the state is ever going to get there because of this measure.
No, they don't have.
Yeah. So, and that was really important because that one, I mean, we just did this, and this was deemed a strength of ours.
Right.
Is that we had a cash balance policy, and two, we had a healthy cash balance in relation to our levy cycle. So we've already moved across the top with the governors. We've moved through the House, and right now we're late April, early May. The Senate is holding, when they come back from legislative spring break, the Senate will be holding their hearings. We'll have additional opportunities to testify. We do not know what version the Senate is going to roll out, but my colleagues here in Hamilton County, public schools across Ohio have been heavily advocating that they pull out this 30%. I mean, it really is a problem. And I think the public education community is doing a good job of helping them understand why this is a really difficult situation for all of us. So the ask, when we think about what's happening, what could come out of the Senate, or when we see what comes out of the Senate, is that we want to protect the guarantee. You know, remember, we can't just rely on what came out of the House, because when it gets to conference committee, they're going to reconcile all three versions. Okay, they'll have the governor's version, they'll have the House version, and they'll have the Senate version. So really all three of those things, and any measures in them, and then maybe something new could be in play. So we need to protect the guarantee. This 30% cash balance provision has got to go. Okay. And how about we think about some measure that increases state funding? So we've got to figure out some way, some realistic capacity calculation that actually does drive an increase in state revenue. I mean, if you think about it, it really isn't realistic that we've had flatline state funding for 6 years, which really, as Tim likes to point out, isn't really flatline. Because if you're staying flat when inflation is increasing, that's not flat. You're losing ground, right? So some measure that can have some sort of inflationary allocation in the capacity version of the formula. And so I feel like kind of a little bit like a broken record that we're kind of in wait and see, but we're still a little bit in wait and see. We need to see what the Senate comes out with, but this is our ask. And so when we see what comes out of the Senate, this is our message. And we'll be, you know, continuing to work with our community groups and our parents to perhaps, depending on what the Senate version looks like, voice this ask.
I think too, even though we haven't had an increase, I feel nervous about not advocating for the fair school funding plan with some added provisions like you mentioned, just because I went on and I looked at the list, how the House version would affect every school district in Ohio. I don't know if anybody looked at that. We are one of the very few who in this little short term, with no plan, temporarily get a little bump. Other districts are losing millions. Not like, unless I read it wrong.
I think they're losing millions from number 2. I think they're losing millions because of the cash balance provision. I think that the House's measure drives an increase to nearly everyone.
I mean, yes, Indian Hill was on the list, but also like rural areas, a lot of rural areas.
Well, we can look at that further. I think that's good.
I mean,
That's good
like,
feedback.
I looked, I thought, oh, wow, if all these districts are losing that much, I wonder what we're doing. Boom, we had a little bump. And I'm like, that didn't make sense,
Yeah.
other than I felt like,
Is that slide earlier of the guarantee with that tiny little 36,000? Do you think?
That's the House's version, but as I understood it, everybody gets a little bit.
Oh,
And so if you're losing money, you would be losing it because you have significant cash balance.
I mean, we were one of the very few that.
Well, think about where we are though. If this would have been 2 years ago, we would be losing money. We're gonna finish this school year just below 30%. And so that's why we're not forecasted to lose money. If this was 2 or 3 years ago, we were at 33, 34, 35. That's where we are in the cycle. If you just passed a levy, if you're Reading, who just passed a 7 or 8 mil operating levy, they're slated to lose $10 million.
oh.
It doesn't make any sense.
I think which, I don't know if this is where you're going, but one of the questions for me is, what is the advocacy common interest as we think about districts around, since you get enough weight, you push on the things and get the 1 or 2 most important of these over the line, right? Because we've talked about high performing districts or there's a certain common interest there. If you think about rural, you know, and other, anyone, the 30% thing, anyone who's passed a levy, it's like, it's automatically mean you're gonna be back more often. And so you gotta ask more often, you're likely to not get it every time. And so it feels like that's something that could be enough combined caring about to sort of push and say 30% is reasonable.
Right.
It's not good management of any, you know, financial situation.
So a lot of common ground in number 2.
Yeah.
225 of us common ground on number 1. There's 225 of us on the guarantee.
Yeah.
And Jeannie asked us in finance committee, there is there is some concern that our advocacy here does address the districts at the 20 mil floor. We're not at the 20 mil floor. We're not ever going to be at the 20 mil floor. But, there is some concern that our points of advocacy don't support that. And I feel like, I'm not in a position to advocate for their specific needs, but I don't know that the fair school funding plan would necessarily help them. It is designed to make us go like this against each other. Public schools. It is designed. That is by design, I believe that.
Public schools, knocking heads for the available funding or?
Advocating for different things.
And to
So
take
we're not
different things.
unified.
That we're not
So it's
unified.
Like we were saying, it's the long game of them, like death by 1,000 cuts.
And to go back to the voters, so often.
Yes, you're not gonna.
You're not gonna, I mean, even a district like Wyoming that loves its schools,
Yeah.
It's a challenge.
you can't ask them
Part of
again.
the reason why you have credibility is demonstrated financial stewardship. It was 17 and we thought it might be 21. It won't be until 27. So when you go to that conversation and like, this is what we've tried to do to manage this well, it sort of makes it impossible for you to do it well enough that you don't come back so often. And so it just inherently undermines like, how well are you doing with this thing we just gave you? And now you're asking for more. There's a point where it's just sort of like, I'm out. So then when it begins to fail, then ultimately you either said immediately cut spending. For us, 80% of it is teachers, or instructors. And so then you just eventually, sort of like you just keep going down at some point. I remember being in this conversation where years ago, I was like, it isn't possible that people are actively, intentionally trying to kill public school. And I don't know if it's Dean or whoever says, I'm not sure about that. And I was like, really? And that was the beginning of a level of awareness that feels, today, it just seems like there's some intentional things. When you think about the 15% increase in the biennium around, for essentially 10% of students perhaps, to get coupons to make it less expensive for them to do the thing they're already doing.
Yes.
Given that it doesn't
Their
enable,
rebate,
right,
yes.
it doesn't enable someone who doesn't have access to get access. You just understand what that's about or what the intention of it is.
Sam, anything to add?
We also talked about number 3. I think number 3 really impacts everyone. I mean, that's
does.
like just, why can't we just look at where we are and moving up? We all need to move with inflation.
But we all know that number 3 is contingent upon stopping the vouchers, or at least
That expense, that increased
that
expense.
increased
to it, right.
expense of the
Yes.
vouchers. And there is where it goes. And what did Senator Runner say to you about, survival of schools?
Well, that he believes in the free market,
Yeah.
that one, he said a lot of things.
Yeah, he did.
But,
He did, I'm sorry, he did. Karen took him on, but it didn't work.
Well, and it's helpful to see the process because everyone has wanted to go, we want to say something, we want to do something, but there's so many things that are in play. And to find out what's going to rise to the surface of it, this is helpful.
I do think it's important that we articulate our collective voice at the right time,
Yeah.
so that it has the best
Right.
impact
Right.
and the
Yeah.
most intended impact for us long
Yeah.
term.
And
Thank
two, I think, is just if you think about the state budget being applied, there are a couple things rising to the top that may help us collectively around the state. People are not happy that they could dedicate 600 million to buy bonds for a stadium. They don't have money to fully fund our public schools. But they can do that, and then also the increase for vouchers. I mean, those two things, all of those things can't be true.
It does add to the question, there's a voice thing, collectively together is valuable. If you can just put earplugs in or noise canceling headphones, the voice and the loudness of it doesn't shift your decision. I guess the other part is, what's the consequence? Sort of like, there's an appeal, to goodness and wonderful and the rightness of 90% of our kids being educated in public school. The question I have is like, what's the consequence for the people who are voting to do something different than that when it comes to the next election? Like, what's the way that level of advocacy is impacting some pressure for the people who are in these rooms? In some ways, protecting the interests of some of the people who are either electing them or funding them. How do they understand there's a consequence with the rest of us who aren't happy about what they do? I'm not gonna ask you to answer that question. I'm just trying to figure out how that part of it comes in because I'd like to appeal to the goodness of their humanity, but won't necessarily be just that.
Property values, maybe, decreasing property values in communities with strong public schools. That vilifying of public schools, but then taking away the state money and relying on the locality to, individual taxpayers to pass a levy when you vilified, politicians have vilified their local public schools. I think, that's gonna come around to be problematic for reelection. But that seems to be a while, so I don't know.
But, yeah, we're also dealing with the supermajority. Remember, there's enough there that even a veto of the governor can be overrun. Yeah, so,
So another reason the loud voice may not be sufficient.
Right now, no.
If they don't fear that they won't be reelected.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of voices, and the House version sailed on through, so I think there are a lot of versions not happy, and a lot of people not happy with it. But,
Hopeful.
Thank
thank
you.
you.
this is a very
You're so
uplifting.
good at it every time. So smart.
She's working
You're so
hard.
smart.
These are getting first. Yes.
I don't know how to turn it off.
Go, Libby.
Go, Libby. Go, Libby.
All right, thank you. We're ready for committee reports. Yes, I am gonna keep moving on.
Yeah.
The Belonging and Inclusion Collaborative has an upcoming meeting, so I'm gonna move on then to Citizens Advisory. You heard the second group give their report. The only meeting left is a thank you and goodbye meeting, and then again this summer we'll come up with new topics and new people because half the leaders or half the members will have completed their 2-year obligation. District leadership team.
We have a meeting scheduled, for Wednesday, and, outside of that, there's no update. We'll be talking about a vision for grading practices and academic feedback, to students and families, and so looking forward to that conversation.
Okay, and facilities?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry, did you?
No, I just said, did we do that? Was I like listening to you speak and then not hear it?
Meetings coming up.
Meetings coming up, thank you.
Yeah.
You said it and I wasn't.
There's nothing.
I'm still thinking about it. Sorry.
Yes, so just a few updates from facilities, so anyone can join in. We had a core team meeting on Wednesday, April 16th. One of the team discussed, again, it's right now, we're really focused on pre-construction work, Hilltop, excited about the momentum of the team. The team discussed several, exciting interior design features. That will connect all of the primary schools. There's a lot going on right in here. That's
Did
fine.
we just lose the out? No, we still got the out.
It's still going. So again, this goes back to the notion of a vision for our primary facilities that has, alignment across all 3 schools, but uniqueness, within each school based on the community in which they live. And so we're excited about the momentum to continue that conversation. Also talked about different possibilities for roofing structures, when it comes down to it. Based on the impact to the instructional spaces and increase in costs, we determined that, it's best to move forward with a more flatter rooftop. And so again, just reviewing the design of the building. And then, we also had, several different modifications to the current design that were based on, originally we had some changes that were based on the community design workshop, which was exciting. And then we recently held a staff design workshop. And so that led to more adjustments. It keeps getting better and better and better, all with the student experience in mind. And we're very excited that we're going to be going out and talking to students soon, primary and middle school students. So it's exciting.
Could you repeat the flat roof? Hard to hear.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
We did look at a number of,
We're looking at different kinds
Yes.
of roofs.
it adds a significant amount of money because when you change the the roof line.
Yeah, the structure has to extend all the way up to that roof line, and so what the impact is square footage in classroom space. So
But when you have a school that sits down and people are driving,
well, one of the changes that happened in the design was, instead of going main floor down, it goes main floor up. So that's,
Okay.
that's a change on the design from the initial thought of going down.
they won't
we-
necessarily have a view of a,
That's right.
AC. No, and they're
And
putting
track.
AC, so a lot of the other differences, like, right now when you pass Hilltop, you see all the AC units and like the balls on the roof and
Yeah,
whatever.
right.
Right.
That, he
Enclosing.
played around with enclosing some of it, but other stuff is gonna be inside, like where it can be indoors or in the back. It would be maybe a unit up top, but it's not covered in units. So it would still be a low slope, and then there's drainage on the inside. When you see all the differences though, you would.
And also when you change.
You'll be okay.
But
It'll be all right.
considering, so
I'll show it to
the roof line is obviously a very big topic that we're continuing to talk about, but that simple kind of gable idea was part of what we had to think about right away, because what's the cost impact and what's the impact to the classroom space inside the building?
It did change a number of things.
Mhm.
Like you lose space in the building when you can't put the ACs up
And that's some
there.
of our committee members who were wanting cable. That was like, I mean, I
Oh,
think you were interested in a different roof,
Yeah.
like some people, but what'd you say?
a glass cable.
It's
I wanna
cable.
Well, there will be options for that.
Yeah,
That's
there
a
will be-
separate funding
Yeah,
stream.
there will be.
Go buy a
And
lottery
I don't
ticket,
have the
so
date
you're
for the next design, May 13th, so coming up on an opportunity to view that, and I'm very excited about that, because I think that the work of incorporating the community's feedback and the staff members' feedback and student feedback will be powerful, and I think it's really exciting, so.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. I love you all. I trust you. It'll be fun.
And it is every 2 weeks. I mean, at least we're meeting regularly every 2 weeks for, we say 2 hours and it's not 2.5, right? In addition to us.
Thank you,
So
thank you
they're,
for that
I mean, they're
commitment.
getting a lot of work done.
Yep.
In each one for sure, right?
Finance?
Oh, I think we did.
Our finance committee met tonight, right before this meeting. We started off by looking at the analytic, which focused only on salary this time. We'll be getting the benefits posted here shortly, but the salary projections are on the mark, and so that was a positive. Like I said, we will be looking at benefits in a few weeks. Then we looked at an article related to a school district, Trimble local school district, that was placed on fiscal emergency by the state auditor recently, within the last week or two. And it just, we looked at it from a couple different perspectives. One was really just the importance of controls, and just kind of reflecting on how many different layers and types of controls that we've put together as a school district. Rhonda's installed, things like the analytic itself, the fact that we have a finance committee that is vibrant and different forms of membership, our 5-year forecast, our standards that we've implemented with the 5-year forecast, and then just hiring practices, connecting new hires with departures or retirements, and then our monthly reports, ensuring that they add up. And so I'm just kind of really just reflecting and appreciating that we have things in place that some of these districts that find themselves in compromise perhaps do not, or at least are not as faithful to them as we've tried to be. Just kind of an FYI, the auditor of the state is promising a heat map that's coming, that's going to look at our currently 5-year forecast, maybe down the road a 3-year forecast, to see how close we are getting. Kind of like that childhood game, you're getting warmer, and then you're hot, meaning your cash balance is too low, which obviously is incredibly ironic.
We're not sure, is it supposed to be too high, or is it supposed to be too low? We're not
Just
sure.
right. No,
Yes.
that's a Goldilocks problem for us if this 30% thing goes into effect. So anyway, just be on the lookout for that, and also be aware that when it does come out, that we're at the tail end of our levy cycle, and so we might be getting warmer, right? As it reflected on this heat map, and it's okay. That's what's supposed to happen that way. That's the plan with these levies. That's their design essentially. Then we looked at the spring settlement, real estate taxes, received a little over 12 million. And again, that's, more than the last, year or so, again, progressing as it should in terms of recovery of real estate taxes. And then we had the pleasure of listening about the state biennium budget that we all
Twice in a
listened to.
night.
Yes, you know?
It's really cemented in your mind.
Oh, yeah, no, it's good time.
There every
Anyway,
time.
yeah. And that was our meeting. So thank you to Rhonda.
Thank you. Great. Okay. Policy Review Committee, we actually have some policies coming up, but, did you want to say something now?
Well,
or
just
as we
at the
get
last
there?
meeting, we pulled some policies off of this that we wanted to, get some more interpretation on, reach out to legal counsel about those policies and see, really what opportunities there are to reflect on those. And so those are pulled off of this list. These are the policies that we were comfortable moving forward with, and we'll, at our planning meeting, we'll discuss the other policies again.
Okay, Board of Education report, that would be to, these policies, unless someone has a comment or concern, these are the ones that, when we did the 30-day read, we felt they were fine and ready to go. And so, we're asking that you approve those this evening. And then the, next thing to approve would be the 26-27 district calendar.
Yeah, just quickly, some highlights on this calendar. Again, this calendar is connected to the primary facilities construction process. It's really designed around the need for a longer winter break during the 26-27 school year. So we've been working with this calendar for a while. And as we've landed on the timeline for construction, we've landed on this calendar. And so there's a few tweaks, just a couple highlights. You know, the student year begins on August 10th. It ends on May 27th. Those days allow us to have a 3-week window during winter break, which is when we anticipate there'll be more student movement. Students moving out of a temporary school to go into their new Hilltop, and then students moving from their current Vermont into their temporary school. And so that schedule will allow for that.
All right. May I have a motion to approve the Board of Education report?
So moved.
Second,
May I have a roll call?
Mrs. Aller?
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick?
Yes.
Mr. Feldmeyer?
yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. G?
Yes. Thank you. Board of Education report.
I'll
Someone
take
want
this one. This
tell us
next
about
one is,
Stan?
yeah, this next one is the resolution selecting Stan as the commissioning agent. We went through the, statutory procurement process, for this. We had, help me, Tim, 5 qualifications submitted, and, we reviewed those with, both our design team, Richley, and, our construction team, HGC. And so deemed Stan to be the most qualified and asked for a pricing proposal. And so their proposal was very competitive, significantly below budget, and sent that to our attorney team, our legal team for review. And after following that process, we're recommending to enter into the contract with Stan for commissioning services for the primary facilities project.
All right, thank you. May I have a motion to approve the Board of Education report?
So moved.
Second.
May I have a roll call?
Mrs. Broderick?
Yes.
Mr. Feldmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. G?
Yes.
Mrs. Dollar?
Yes. Treasurer's report.
Thanks, Jeannie. Item A, approval of the minutes from the March 31st regular meeting and the April 8th planning meeting. Item B, approve the statement of revenues and expenditures for month ending March 31st. Item C, the appropriations for the month of April, the appropriations adjustments. Item D, this is the annual piece. This time of the year, we have to renew our workers' compensation group rating program. We moved with Sedgwick a few years ago. They're doing a good job for us. So this is an annual renew, and this is actually for calendar year 2026. And item E, approval of the report, please.
All right, may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. May I have a roll call?
Mr. Feldmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. G?
Yes.
Mrs. Dollar?
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick?
Yes.
Thank you.
Superintendent report.
Thanks, thank you. I have several personnel items. Number one is recommendation to approve resignations that have been submitted Number 2 is a recommendation to approve new personnel, and this is Corinne Doyle. And we're recommending her for the high school principal's administrative assistant. So we are excited for her to begin very soon. I know that's an exciting change for the high school. And number 3, very excited to be at a position where we are able to recommend a principal for the Wyoming primary school. So I want to talk just a little bit about that process and yep, I'm gonna take some time on this. I'm sorry. We're gonna really,
This is my favorite part.
there you go, yes. Perfect.
Really?
So excited again to talk about the process. We had 54 applicants in all. We've talked about the importance of focus groups. We held staff focus group, community focus groups, all to identify the strengths of our primary schools, which are many, growth opportunities for areas that the schools can continue to grow. And most importantly, the characteristics that people are looking for in the next Wyoming primary schools principal. From there, we had several rounds of interviews to identify finalists. Those finalists met with our primary schools interview committee, and excited to be here tonight to recommend Jen Earhart as the new principal of Wyoming Primary Schools. A little bit of background on Jen. Has experience as an intervention specialist, a primary teacher, third grade, primary schools counselor, and interim building principal experience, and is coming to us from Indian Hill Primary School. And, I think it's powerful to share some of the reflections through the interview process, and through conversations that we've had with people who have been able to work with you, Jen. This is, it's a powerful list. And so I'll read these really quickly, but I think it's important to hear what people have to say about who you are. Problem solver, communicator, unconditional positive regard, MTSS strength, listener, connects with primary staff, experience as a teacher, intervention specialist, counselor with administrative responsibilities, caring and empathetic leader, similar district experience, sense of humor, focus on teaching skills while protecting the dignity of students, leading from the heart, ability to say what sometimes no one else will say, understands our needs, data-driven, loves kids, can be empathetic and hold others accountable, boots on the ground leader, importance of data, tier 1 and tier 2, teacher instruction, E plus R equals O experience. You all know what that is, yes. Measure of success from where a child starts, experience with construction, and a focus on belonging and connections. And it was very apparent right off the bat that there was this wonderful connection that our primary folks had with you during the interview process, and we're very excited to welcome you to Wyoming City Schools.
Thank you. I already feel the love. And just watching what has gone on this evening, this collective vision and focus on student centeredness, I just am so grateful. So I'm happy to be here.
And so we'll keep going.
Yeah,
and then,
we'll get to
because,
a vote, and then we'll be
because
back.
We're right there. Yes, we're right there. So number 4 is a recommendation to approve transition days for our new principal to have some onboarding work and connect with the primary staff, connect with Dr. Kirshner. Number 5 is a recommendation to approve these continuing contracts, and we're going to pause for a second. I think Erica's going to share just some highlights. This is always a special moment. Yeah.
I want to congratulate these
Yeah.
people who worked hard to get to this place.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm excited to be a part of this, their journey and to get into, to get on the board agenda for being recommended for continuing contracts. So we have 4 of our staff members, 2 from the primary school, 1 from middle school, and 1 from high school. So just a few words that were shared by their principals. So Virginia Hadzik is one of our primary music teachers. And it looks like she's been with us since 2020. She is a teacher that nurtures a love of music for all students. has a positive rapport with her students, and also supported with helping to facilitate the redesign of the Wyoming primary school music curriculum. Also has helped, been instrumental in helping to plan and implement the Wyoming Primary School Family Specials Night. And it's just an amazing asset to our school district. So that's Virginia. Also at the primary school, Erin Hunley, currently a second grade teacher at Elm. And again, some wonderful words about her. She's done a great job of creating a warm, welcoming environment for her second grade students. She also once served as a kindergarten teacher, and she has been a part of the primary literacy committee, and has helped, which has helped create the practice profile for literacy there at the primary, and has done a wonderful job of collaborating with the team of teachers and serving as a leader for primary school. And for the middle school, we have Ignacio Perez, one of our fifth and sixth grade Spanish teacher. And also some wonderful words shared about Ignacio is as positive and energizing, has created a positive and energizing experience for students in Spanish. And just amazing lessons that immerse the students in the study of world language, which we've heard a lot about our world language program tonight. He is also a member of the building leadership team, and also additionally serves as an advisor for the ping pong and board game club. Yeah.
It is a big deal.
Ping pong is a big deal.
I'm saying it's a great, they love it.
Additionally, strengths in just instruction, leadership, and also student engagement. And then at the high school, Amy Malloy, one of our math teachers, and some wonderful words shared about her, just consistently demonstrates excellence in instruction, leadership, and a deep commitment to the school community, creates an engaging learning environment for our students, also serves on the building leadership team, and also leads the school's positive behavior and intervention support, so that PBIS program there at the high school, and is also very involved with student council. So those are our 4 leaders.
I would like to note that 2 of them are Wyoming graduates and had wonderful teachers that got to meet where they are. All right, thank you.
Okay, so a lot of great things here on my report. And so the next one is a recommendation to approve of the renewal of these limited contracts. And so here you see very dedicated educators that do amazing work every single day. Number 7, recommendation to approve these educational aides, library aides, clinic aides, health specialists, parent resource liaison. And so again, you have people who are really just doing incredible things in the trenches with students and with families. Number 8 is recommendation to approve these staff members' children attending Wyoming City Schools for the 25-26 school year. Number 9, recommendation to approve these 2 athletic event workers for spring events. Number 10, recommendation to approve this athletic supplemental contract for a track assistant. Number 11, recommendation to approve these active volunteers that were part of that link. And again, this is through Raptor volunteer experiences alive in Wyoming, and that's super powerful. Item B on my report, you can see these are all recommendations to approve these summer projects or camps that are going on. So you see Boys and Girls Soccer Camp, Science and Technology Camp, also the Model UN Training Camp. And then item C is a recommendation to approve an overnight field trip for the middle school Power of the Pen state tournament, which is great that they continue to be in that competition. And then items D, E, and F is a recommendation to approve school fees. We have primary, middle school, and high school school fees that are part of this, and that's part of our spring routine. And then G through K are recommendations to approve these handbooks. And so you can see the 3 student handbooks, primary, middle school, and high school, also have an administrator handbook and a classified handbook as part of this collection.
Does that fall to you, Eric, to do the handle?
Yeah, my pleasure.
Well, the pleasure for us is that you put the changes in yellow.
It was very-
so we can find them.
It was very.
A wonderful team.
Thank you.
Good job.
May I have a motion to approve the superintendent's report?
So,
Second. Roll call.
Mr. Thomas?
yes.
Mrs. G? Yes. Mrs. Dollar?
Yes.
Mrs. Berger?
Yes.
Mr. Feldmeyer?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Let's go back. Would you be willing to introduce those who came here?
Yes, oh my goodness, you're still awake? Okay, so this is my husband, Dwayne Earhart, and this is my daughter, Jory. She is 16, and my daughter, Jaffa, who is 18, almost 19. So we are just so thrilled, to be here tonight. Thank you for such a warm welcome. I am beyond excited, like, I can't wait to get started, so, thank you.
Great, thank you.
We've got to get Wyoming gear forever now, because you have to wear it. When you're in your community.
Like, okay, where did they go to? Where do you go to school?
With your,
Yeah.
Okay, well, one color's right.
well, we just gotta get rid of the yellow. We just gotta get rid of the yellow. Just can't have yellow.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to have you on board. I'd make some statement about hit the ground running, but we did that with the assistant superintendent. She wore a boot for.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
You either really hit the ground or you really not.
It wasn't a work injury.
Day 3, I'm in regular shoes. Day 3.
Yeah.
Correct. Thank you. Sir, do you have an update?
Just, it's, very briefly, exciting time. You know, we're back with, in the final stretch, exciting time. Our May meeting is always a great one. It is when we will celebrate student staff achievement. So again, we'll be at the middle school for our May regular board meeting. And just wish the very best of our students as they finish strong, from our youngest all the way up through our folks that are graduating. It's an exciting time. And our kids deserve, all the great things that are coming to them because we have amazing kids. Doesn't matter where you go, who you talk to, that's the story that you hear. So exciting time. Yep.
Terrific.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Roll call.
Mrs. G?
Will the
Yes.
vote go?
Mrs. Dollar?
Yes.
Mrs. Berger?
Yeah.
Mr. Feldmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yeah.